One thing I've actually noticed, every time there's a BMF title fight, whenever the UFC puts on a BMF title fight, the card that the UFC puts on usually happens when there's a major boxing fight, like a not just a major boxing fight, but the biggest fight of the year. So if you look at the first BMF fight that happened between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, that literally happened on the eve when Canelo was gonna fight Kovalev, and at the time, obviously Canelo at the time was, and he still is to some extent, one of the biggest draws in boxing. And at that time, he clearly was the biggest draw in boxing. Like at that time, I think Anthony Joshua's lost and his star and luster went down, and Canelo was on top of the boxing world. He was literally keep going up weight classes and beating top fighters, and so he was on top of the world. And it looked like literally he was gonna fight Kovalev, and let's be real, that was a big boxing card. That was a massive boxing card. Canelo fighting Kovalev, and at the same time, the Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal fight was going on, and now it's happened again. When there's a fight between Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier, they're both headlining a massive card with several good fights going on, like Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira, with Tony Ferguson fighting on the card with Bobby Green. Like several good fights were going on, right? Literally at the same time, when that card was going on, Terence Crawford was fighting Errol Spence, which was the biggest fight, definitely the most important fight of the year. And not only that, it's probably one of the most important fights of the last half decade, because everyone's been clamoring to watch that fight. So I'm just wondering, why does this keep happening? Are they doing it on purpose? It could be a coincidence, but a part of me doesn't think it is. One of the reasons why I think it's happening is because maybe they want to take shine away from boxing, or maybe because they know that there's a massive crossover between UFC and boxing. If there's an audience tuning into boxing, they're gonna easily switch over and watch the UFC. So I don't know who's booking which venue first. Maybe it's the boxing that's booking the venue first, and then the UFC's following suit, or maybe it's the UFC that's booking the event first, pay-per-view, and then it's the boxing that's actually following suit. But whichever way it is, it just seems like, is it a coincidence that two of the biggest boxing cards in the past several years have happened on a BMF title fight night? I mean, what's the chances of that happening? They could have picked the date the next week. They could have picked the date the couple of weeks before. They could have picked any date, because they could have pushed it a further week. But for some reason, they always do it on the same day. And for fight fans, it's a bit of a headache as well, because we have to choose between watching a UFC or watching boxing. It's very hard simultaneously to watch two events at the same time. Unless you've got two TV screens and you're paying for two pay-per-views, it's hard to do it. So, yeah, I'm just wondering why this keeps happening. There must be a reason, or reason behind it. But for some reason, whether it's the UFC or boxing, they keep making events on the same day. So whenever a BMF title fight happens, it usually happens on the same date that a massive boxing card is happening. For me personally, I don't really mind it, because you can I as soon as one event finishes, you can move on to the next one. So as soon as Crawford versus Spence finished, I switched channels and I started watching the UFC, and I saw the Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier fight. So yeah, it's just I'm not criticizing anyone, but I'm just wondering how come this is happening in the sport. Like, what's the reason behind it? Is there some method behind the madness, or is it a simple coincidence? I don't think it's coincidental. It's happened twice now. There must be a reason behind it. Why do they keep putting BMF title fights on the same night, on the same day, or whatever, when there's a massive boxing card going on, or vice versa? Tell me what you think below, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace.